Can Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens catch the Pittsburgh Steelers for the AFC North? There is a clear path to it. We'll discuss on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every Wednesday, by Locked On NFL expert, the brain, Luke Braun. On today's episode, we are going to discuss who won the Bryce Young trade. Luke's got a hot take for you. Also, can the Minnesota Vikings catch the Detroit Lions for the NFC North? And first, can the Ravens catch the Pittsburgh Steelers? There is a realistic path to that happening, and it doesn't even take a lot of luck for the Ravens to do it. Before we get into it, though, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On NFL podcast your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the final month of the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Luke, yesterday, Lauren and I discussed some Super Bowl dark horses, some teams who aren't the top two favorites. And the two teams that we're about to discuss were two teams that we identified as people who could reasonably make it to the Super Bowl. But it would be a much easier path for the Baltimore Ravens to make it to that Super Bowl if they were able to catch the Pittsburgh Steelers and win the AFC North. And although they're down about 3 games right now, they're coming out of the bye, and there is a realistic chance that they could do it. What are your thoughts on that?
They kind of need to parlay like 5 games. They need to win out. They need some upsets to happen. They need a little bit too much help. But, you know, stranger things have happened, I guess.
I'm looking at it, and I don't know how much help they actually need. Things have of course, they need the Steelers to lose some games. That's obviously going to be part of this, but they're very losable games. So the Steelers go to Philadelphia and play the Eagles this week. Then they play the Ravens, and of course, the Ravens have to handle their business at home on Saturday, December 21st. So it's very reasonable that the Steelers could lose to the Eagles this weekend. The Ravens handle their business. And then the Steelers play the Chiefs on Christmas just 4 days later. They could absolutely lose that game to the Dark Magic Chiefs, who just can't seem to lose. So after that, and if the Ravens on the flip side, with their schedule, Steelers or Giants, they play this weekend, win. Then the Steelers game. Then they play the Texans again, who are a good team, but you know, they're not as good as they were last year. And then they finish with the Browns. I think that it doesn't really take too much for the Ravens to make this happen. It just depends on if you think they are capable based on the way that they played football so far this season.
Well, yeah, so they have to be consistent, which they haven't been. I mean, that's a bar none. They have not been consistent. They have to find a way to be consistent. And especially if you're going to talk, Super Bowl dark horse, they basically have to string out like 7-8 wins in a row here.
Right.
I don't know if they are, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they haven't been that consistent. Lamar Jackson has laid a couple eggs. You can't do that anymore. You can no more eggs. You're out of eggs. You gotta go to the store. You're out of eggs. The Steelers, for the Ravens to win the division, just scenarios wise here, they basically need the Bengals to win that Week 18 matchup. If the Steelers win that Week 18 matchup, lose every other game, including that one to the Ravens, the only way the Ravens get the division is by winning out entirely, because they'll have one more win, but they won't get tiebreakers. To get tiebreakers on the Steelers, the Bengals need to win that game, and the Browns need to win their Week 18 game against the Ravens need to win their Week 18 game against the Browns. So so immediately, I know the Chiefs, Eagles, great. Yeah, they could lose those games, but immediately you still need the Bengals to figure out how to stop someone and beat the Steelers, which they just have not been able to do at all. We saw that on Monday Night Football. And that, honestly, that feels like the biggest hurdle. Like Lamar Jackson getting hot. Okay, I can buy that. Even if the defense lets him down, like maybe he just gets hot in December, right?
Yeah.
Chiefs, Eagles winning a tough game. Okay, I can buy both of those results. Tough divisional game, Ravens, Steelers in the winter. That one could go either way. Okay, I could buy all of those things. The hardest one to buy is that Bengals Steelers game, and if the Steelers win it, it essentially needs to be like a full on collapse from a Mike Tomlin team in December. And again, that's like really hard to buy, even with a tough schedule.
I hear you. And at the end of the day, I think the Steelers find a way to hold on. But if I'm a Ravens fan, I'm looking at that and I'm like, it's at least possible. And with the Ravens coming out of their bye week, you got to think that some of that consistency, they're able to self-scout, iron some things out. And that's what my guy Kevin Allstriker from Locked On Ravens was talking about, is them, coming out of that bye and being ready to go for this back stretch of the season.
Right, which remaining game on the schedule for Baltimore is the most important? Is it the Giants? Is it the Steelers, the Texans, the Browns? And obviously, very overwhelmingly, the answer was the Steelers. And that 100% is the correct answer. There's no doubt about it that, to me, I think that if you think about where these two teams are between the Ravens and the Steelers, and the Steelers are technically 3 games up in the division, like, that's the most important game. But this Giants game, I think, sets a very good tone, or at least it can. The Ravens open up on FanDuel. Our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel has this Ravens game 14.5-point favorites. The Ravens, 14.5-point favorites in this game. That is an astronomical line. And if I'm the Ravens and I'm coming out of the bye week, I want to send a message.
That's what they got to do. They got to come out and send that. I want them to cover that spread. I want them to win by 20-some points against the lowly New York Giants. If they don't do that and they don't play their best football out of this bye, then I'll lose a lot of faith. But I do want to ask you this, Luke, before we move on, because it is such a great topic. If you're looking at the teams in the AFC and who could maybe beat the Bills or the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl, are the Ravens and the Steelers your first picks, or is there somebody else?
I think it's the Steelers are my first pick.
That was mine as well.
By a good margin. And then I guess the Ravens are the next best pick. It still kind of feels like it's like a two-team conference right now with the Steelers also lurking. But here's where the Ravens are more likely to be. 5th or 6th seed, right? I mean, the Ravens could end up knocking off the Steelers themselves. Screw it. Hey, you get, all this is for who gets home field advantage in that game, but you go beat the Steelers in January, you win. And then you get to feel kind of like you did win the division, even though you don't get the bet. Like you kind of did. You kind of did get the last laugh, though. Like,
right.
That could be the scenario. Or if they get the 5th seed, they go on the road and play the Houston Texans, who are more inconsistent than the Ravens. And suddenly you're in the divisional round. You got a chip in a chair. Those games start 0-0. And as much as we like to kind of do the look ahead thing and say, well, who's our Super Bowl contenders? You're parlaying 3 games at least, or 4. If you're trying to predict who the real Super Bowl contenders are, well, 1 game at a time. And that's the way that they're going to do this, is 1 game at a time. They're not thinking about the Steelers yet, or they better not be thinking about the Steelers
right,
yet.
They better not.
Or the Browns yet. No, they're looking at how they can get every single little advantage they possibly can against the Giants, and hopefully they can put those guys into the dirt. But it's the NFL. I'm not going to lose the faith, even if they, if that one gets a little squirrely on them, they don't play their best game. They'll bring their best against the Steelers. And I don't think what happens against the Giants is going to change my opinion about that. Like, they'll bring their best about the Steelers. It's a divisional game. They always
they lose.
do. They always do. Then they'll come out mad. They
they
always bring their best against the Steelers.
No,
it's moot now, because if they lose to the Giants, then they probably can't catch the Steelers anyways, and you're just jockeying for wild card position.
Not. Yeah.
But in terms of that specific game and what we're going to watch on our TVs, Ravens are bringing their best to that game no matter what. They'll bring their best to that game if they're 0-10 going into it. It's just the way the AFC North is.
But if you lose to this Giants team, I'm sorry, I'm done with you. I don't care what happens after that. But with that being said,
neither do the AFC North odds.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to look at the NFC North, which the Detroit Lions have gotten so much pub in the NFC North that you wouldn't think it's possible, but the Vikings could absolutely catch them. We got the perfect guy to ask about it. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, B-I-L-T, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. You can redeem points for flights, hotel stays, even future rent payments with over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program. The possibilities are endless. I love using points for travel, and Built makes it so easy to turn rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our link so they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. All right, Luke, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast, looking at some kind of forgotten about division races that still aren't necessarily over. And we move to the NFC North, where the Detroit Lions currently have a bit of a stranglehold on everyone's attention in the NFC as they sit at 12-1. But if you didn't know, the Minnesota Vikings are 11-2.
One game back.
Technically, one game back from the Lions. You could say logically they are 2 because they've lost. But the Vikings still do have the ability to catch the Detroit Lions. Now, Luke, before I ask you about how it happens, if you think it's possible, all of those things, I just want to let you know that Matt Derry from Locked On Lions is sick of the haters, and specifically a hater on the Vikings.
All right, the list goes on and on. Byron Murphy Jr. of the Vikings, the cornerback. What were his quotes again? He's tired of hearing about the Lions. I just keep hearing it over and over. I'm just over them. You know, Detroit, they're just talking about them too much, and I'm just over them. Well, Byron, when you had a chance to beat them earlier in the year, you lost. Hold it. Take it. Caress it. Baby, you lost. And the Vikings are playing really good football. Really good football. They don't lose. I mean, the Vikings are ridiculous how they're playing right now. Sam Darnold yesterday, what is going on in this world that Sam Darnold is throwing for 5 touchdowns, scrambling, moving the pocket? The Vikings, they just find a way every single week. And we're going to talk about the NFC North in a second, but Minnesota's only a game behind the Lions at 11-2.
A little bit of a backhanded compliment there from Matt Derry.
No, you can feel the frustration. They want the Vikings to fall away like they were supposed to.
Yep.
Oh, the Vikings were supposed to be exposed 2 months ago as the frauds that they always were. We were all supposed to laugh at them like we did in 2022 again, but they refuse to go away, and everyone in the Lions is like, holy crap, can you guys stop losing? And the Vikings are just screwing around in what was supposed to be a rebuilding year. I can speak a little bit to this, that inside the Vikings, and I don't think I'm blowing up anybody's spot because some of the like major NFL reporters have hinted at this too. They love it. They're like, yeah, please keep forgetting that the Vikings are a game back in this division. Keep anointing the Lions as the kings of the NFC that will just sleepwalk their way to it. Please keep forgetting about us. They love it. The players, you know, the quote Matt Derry is talking about Byron Murphy after winning this Falcons game was like, hey, why don't you talk about us a little bit? You know, I think we maybe earned some of that attention. But then he just kind of talked about, hey, we're playing good. It was more about the Vikings than it was the Lions, Matt. But the brass, the coaches, you know, the organization, they're happy to be kind of overlooked. They like being underestimated. It makes people come with worse plans against them.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You'd rather be the predator than the prey, of course. But yeah,
regression's coming. 24-9 in 1-score games. Yeah, they've got 20 straight losses coming. Sure, man. Yep.
I mean, as you can feel the frustration for Byron Murphy, you can feel the frustration palpable from Luke the Brain Braun as well. But looking at the schedule, the Vikings play the Bears, then the Seahawks, then the Packers, then the Lions. That is a very, very difficult end stretch of the season. And then the Lions, they get the Bills, and then the Bears, and then the 49ers, and then that game against the Vikings. Luke, tell me right now, is that final game of the season going to be for the division?
It's hard. Basically the Lions need to lose this one against the Bills, but it's really hard for the Vikings to get tiebreakers. Because right now the Lions have a common games tiebreaker. They beat the Rams, the Vikings didn't. That's the only difference. Both teams have won all their other games, and then there's the Lions game against the Vikings, which, by the way, they held the lead with like 2 minutes left in that one. So let's not pretend the Lions blew them out or anything. But so what needs to happen is essentially the Vikings and Lions need to be like record tied going into that game. If the Lions are a game ahead going into that game, I don't think it will matter, and unless the Lions lose to the Bears specifically, and the Vikings win their last couple division games here.
Yeah, then division games left for the Vikings. That's kind of a lot in the last 4 weeks of the season.
But the Lions need to go to Soldier Field and lose to a spiraling Bears team. That's tough. And the Vikings need to take care of their business against the Bears and beat the Packers at home in Toyotathon, which they've very much struggled to do. So that's tough to imagine the tiebreaker happening. So it has to be that the Vikings and Lions have the same record going into that game. Then it would be for the division. It would almost certainly get flexed to Sunday Night Football.
Yes.
And be that game, and we would all have a whole bunch of fun with that. But honestly, Vikings are kind of better on the road than they are at home. They're kind of road warriors, and I think they've taken a little bit. They're an 11-2 Cinderella. They're like everyone's overlooking, and I think they're sort of like, I swear to God, I'm going to start seeing them put dog masks on like the 2017 Eagles, because everybody still thinks that they're just going to fall away. It's like they're looking at them like you looked at the 2-0 Saints, going, "Well, this surely won't last." Well, it did last. You're out of time. They're about to clinch the playoffs. It did.
So who wins that game in Week 18 if it's for the division? Do you think that the Vikings are actually a better team than the Lions at this point? Or
I mean, they won't be favored, if that's what you're asking, but I'm not going to predict a game 4 weeks from now.
Have a spine, Luke. Put the calculator down. Do you believe in your team or not?
I believe they can go in and win. Sure, they can go in and take that one. They haven't beaten they are on a 4-game losing streak against the Lions. They're going to show up to that one pissed off. Unless it doesn't matter. Then they might. I mean, if it doesn't matter for seeding or whatever, they might rest starters. So it's whatever. But if it matters, I think you truly enter that game 0-0. Anything can happen, especially, divisional game on the road. Anything can happen in those games, no matter who is the better team. But I mean, I'm not an idiot. The Lions will be favored in that game for sure.
And I will be taking the Vikings in the points. But with that being said, Luke's on a roll today, baby. I'm just here to play point guard. Who won the Bryce Young trade? It may not be as clear-cut as you may think. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by IceShaker. Hey, Locked On NFL fans, I know if you're like me, your holiday shopping list is, let's just call it far from complete. If that's the case, then I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you've heard of it. IceShaker. IceShaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, the NCAA, the MLB, and it will make the ideal gift. It was created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers. IceShakers has sold over 1 million bottles, and they have changed the game with workout bottles. This is the gift that you've been looking for, and you can go to IceShaker.com, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to check out and save 25% on your order. It's kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles. They don't absorb odors. They have a patented twist-in agitator that breaks up powders. They are fantastic. Order your team-branded bottles today at IceShaker.com. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. IceShakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. Again, IceShakers. All right, Luke. Let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. It's been a hot day here on Locked On NFL, and it's only getting hotter. My man, Luke Brain,
this is a spicy one.
I called you Luke Brain. Now they're just mixing together. Luke Braun is truly a man on fire. And we want to talk about two teams that are intimately involved in a deal just a few short years ago, the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears. They made a big deal, number 1 overall pick, sent to Chicago. Chicago ends up with Caleb Williams. The Panthers end up with Bryce Young. Bryce Young looks like a bust. It's not good, but Caleb Williams has not played his best football this season. Carolina Panthers are seeing some really good things out of Bryce Young over the last month. And it leads us to wonder if maybe we called off that trade just a little too quick. And my guy Julian Council from Locked On Panthers talked about how the Panthers maybe aren't winning these games, but there's a lot to like.
The Panthers been right there with them the last 3 weeks, but have not won. Now, no moral victories in the NFL. You either win or you lose, and sometimes you tie. So there are no moral victories. But for this fan base, for this organization and where they are headed, you can take them, but eventually they do get tiring to have a chance against Kansas City and just not be able to get that stop. And with 146 left in that game, I don't think anyone truly believed that Carolina was going to get that stop against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They were going to find a way to win that game again. And it's unfortunate they don't make that tackle. Mahomes gets down there, puts him in field goal range. Sucks to lose that way as time expires. Last week, I felt like the Panthers were the better team for 3 quarters without a doubt. And they gave it away there in that fourth quarter as the defense wasn't as stout. But Carolina, led by Bryce Young, went down the field, took the lead, just could not get that stop defensively.
Listen, I do believe in moral victories, Luke. I think you got to gain confidence. You got to see some decent results, even if it doesn't win. You got to see that things are working. And the Panthers are seeing that, hey, some of these things we're doing are good things. I know that you have your take here. Are we allowed to reopen the investigation on who won this trade?
I think we have to reopen it. What answer you come away with, that's between you and your mirror, but we have to talk about this, okay? So first off, the idea of who's better, Bryce Young or Caleb Williams, we could all argue till we're blue in the face, or who is a better draft, who's a better future, Bryce Young or Caleb Williams, right? Right now, though, if you had to play a game tomorrow and you had to choose which quarterback was your quarterback, you're picking Bryce Young 1,000,000%, right? I mean, he's playing a much faster game. He's taking way less of those horrible sacks that he took last year that now Caleb Williams is taking all of those. He is playing better football than Caleb Williams, bar none right now at this moment. It's obviously not the end of the conversation. How do you project the future? Obviously, Caleb Williams is all potential, and he gets the same kind of endless excuses that Justin Fields got for 3 years. That's just going to be the thing. Everybody's going to be, yeah, but his breakout is coming. Trust me. It's like Dontavion Wicks. The breakout, surely. But Bryce Young is figuring something out and finding it. The Panthers still suck because so much of their roster has atrophied. They've got old man Adam Thielen. Their line is falling apart. All kinds of problems outside the scope of this trade. Here is what Chicago is working with. So let's just, for the sake of argument, call Caleb Williams, Bryce Young a wash. I think right now I would rather have Bryce Young in my building than a halfway ruined Caleb Williams, but whatever.
I very vehemently disagree. I would take Caleb Williams 1,000 times out of 100.
Sure. Let's put a pin in it and we'll revisit it in a little while, because I'm very willing to change opinions on that if Caleb Williams shows me, I don't know, the ability to win a game in the next 2 months, because he hasn't in the last 2. But let's look at everything else. Okay, Tyreek Stevenson, he has directly cost you 2 games. Darnell Wright, the 19th best right tackle in the league. Like, he's fine, but also there's a character thing there too that you can hear Lauren Cox talk about it on Locked On Bears over the last couple of years. DJ Moore, who's quiet quitting on you, and a 2nd-round pick. I feel like that trade did damage to them. Like, who is what about this build of the Bears? Oh, and by the way, GM may be on the hot seat now too. So the GM that made the trade might get fired faster than the GM on the other side of this. Like,
that would be insane. Yeah.
I mean, that would tell you who wins it, right? But what about this build of the Bears that was structured on this trade? Darnell Wright, Tyreek Stevenson, DJ Moore. That is the core of your team. How much of that core is going to be on the team next year? Are they all going to stay?
I would say.
Oh, and the punter, by the way, that outkicks his coverage all the time. Congratulations on your punter.
They actually still have a 2022 second round pick or
Yeah, and
2025
a second round pick.
Here's what I would tell you. There's
So
one
did this build of the
keyword here.
Bears work? I don't know. I feel like the Panthers gave them just enough rope to hang themselves.
Well, did the build work is a different conversation than this trade. Coaching is the word that I still go back to. The Hail Mary with Tyreek Stevenson, to me, coaching, that's a part of the problem. Darnell Wright, you want to talk about character issues, he's still a good enough offensive tackle. You could do far worse. And I do think Caleb Williams is
Like
a
a
far
mid-tier
better
starter.
player.
Yeah. It's like a one
than Bryce
mid-tier
Young.
starter and then
And-
like 2 cancers and Caleb Williams. Like,
Here's
don't
what
know,
I would
man.
say is when Caleb Williams does the thing that Bryce Young is doing right now next year, then we could have the conversation.
When?
Because it's like if we went back a year ago when
If?
Bryce Young was doing what he was doing, the conversation would be totally different now because Bryce Young's in his second year and he's starting to slow it down. And like, I am not going to change I will take Caleb Williams.
Oh,
every
okay. So I'm
time
hearing
possible
Caleb Williams needs to be benched
Bryce Young.
for a little bit.
Oh, that was Tyson Bagent's dad leaking stuff to local radio.
Well, that's how
reporters.
that's how they fixed
I don't
Bryce
care
Young.
about that.
If we bench
Nobody
Caleb
listens
Williams
to
for a
local
couple
radio
weeks
in
and then
Carolina.
put him in Rice, then maybe it works.
No, nobody's listening to local radio in Carolina like they are Chicago. It's not even the same.
I don't
to
know.
me.
Bryce Young sat a couple weeks and he just needed to regroup, came back playing better. Anthony
Caleb Williams
Richardson,
needs a
same
real
thing.
coach. And that's what my final thing that I want to say is I talked to Lauren about this last week and he's like, maybe Thomas Brown. No, and no. Thomas Brown is not the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. Do not do that. Massive mistake. Don't fall for a worse version of Antonio Pierce. Just don't do it, folks. You got to wake up. Do not do that. They need to hire a real NFL football coach to fix what they got going on. So that's all that I really got to say about the Bears. Is do not
Like an
be
offensive
idiots.
mastermind, maybe somebody off the Andy Reid tree.
Do not hire freaking.
I don't know where the Bears go
field
from here.
coordinator that
Like,
just got fired from UCLA. You don't want to do that. Eric Bieniemy,
they tried the
don't do
scheme
that.
lord thing. They've tried the defensive culture guy thing. Like, I don't know where the Bears go from here in terms of a coach. I agree. They need to get somebody in that knows at all what the hell they're doing. But the other thing that's going on in Chicago, and I think it bears mentioning. I don't know if you talked to Lauren about this.
Bears mentioning, no pun intended.
Got him. But the thing that I feel like I have to bring up is the organizational structure of the Bears.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with the trade.
Yes.
But the organizational structure of the Bears right now is in some kind of crisis. There's now Bears local radio is talking about how Kevin Warren is ruining things here.
Yep.
So I can give you a little bit of
But
tease.
Ryan Poles is trying to do damage control. If he's about to
Or
get
is he
fired
trying to
in the
win a
offseason-
political struggle? This is a power struggle. This is some Palpatine stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
So I can give you a little bit of tea on this, by the way, with Kevin Warren. This is 10-year-old tea. But because he had the same job with the Vikings way back when. And then he went and ran the Big Ten for a while and then came back to Chicago. So when he was with the Vikings, this was 2015 offseason. So Adrian Peterson had just missed an entire year on the commissioner's exempt list for the child abuse indictment, I guess would be the legal word to use that. And that whole thing had kind of just reached its conclusion. And Adrian Peterson was in a contract year. So they were trying to contract negotiate after he had come off of a whole year not being on the field. So it was this very, very dicey situation. And Adrian Peterson came out of that situation extraordinarily blood feud mad at Kevin Warren. What is he doing in the football operation side of things? That's never been he is like a business guy. He's just like a suit.
Right.
And he is here pissing off Adrian Peterson and making it impossible for that relationship to really ever be prepared. Adrian Peterson played in 2015, 2 games the next year, and then was gone. And I wonder, I just can't help but think about that burning bridge thing and the meddling and the being where involved in conversations maybe he doesn't belong in. That is, and then I hear Ryan Poles mad about the same thing, and I don't know how, I can't source local radio stuff. I can't check on if that's right or whatever. But on a random ESPN show, I can't speak to that.
But it lines up.
But it doesn't not track.
Right. And you also got to mention flying coaching prospects and coach and stuff like that. Like the Bears just as an organization from top to bottom don't seem like they're doing the right thing. And that's why they need to go hire Mike Vrabel. Yeah, put Mike Vrabel with Caleb Williams, baby.
I don't hate that.
I know you don't.
Like get a bully in there that'll get rid of all the toxicity.
And tell the owner to shut up.
Yeah, right. Like I think that owner needs to be told to shut up. I think that
I know it actually does kind of make sense. Like Mike Vrabel will be like, "Wait, what? No, you shut up, Kevin Warren. I will beat you up. Be quiet."
It would be hard not to feel like John Fox Part 2 though, because that kind of is what they were after when they did John Fox.
Yes. And Matt Eberflus.
But if you right now, if you straight up traded Bryce Young for Caleb Williams on the Bears, I don't know if we would feel that much better about Caleb Williams because Bryce Young's still dealing with a terrible O-line and terrible receivers and terrible scheme and like horrible stuff all around him. It's just that he's had a year and he's had a minute to decompress and maybe he's taken a step forward, and it is no guarantee that the next rookie takes that same step forward. And I think the mistake we all made with Caleb.
We saw Anthony Richardson play better when he came back. We saw Will Levis play better when he came back. We saw Bryce Young play better when he came back.
We don't always get that.
Not always.
Sometimes Justin Fields doesn't take a step forward in 3 years. Sometimes you get Josh Rosens that just suck.
Caleb Williams is more talented than those guys. Like I just
but I think because of the potential, because of the talent, and because of the athleticism, we've all just sort of assumed the one thing we can never ever assume, which is that a college quarterback is going to be the same guy in the NFL. We've all just sort of taken that for granted, and I think that's a big mistake. Maybe it will, but we sure as heck shouldn't take it for granted.
I agree with your overall point, but as it pertains to Caleb Williams and Bryce Young, I will still go with Caleb Williams, but it will be interesting
for us to track
that as we go. Well, Bryce Young didn't show you anything last year either.
But he has shown me something now.
Back. So, we can't, that doesn't seem fair to me. We will see. But with that being said, that is going to do it for us here today on the Locked On NFL podcast. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. For me, your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, my co-host, the Brain, Luke Braun. As we tell you every single episode, stay safe out there.